Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are going to be giving our comprehensive NBA Finals predictions, breaking down all of the keys to Nuggets Heat. And Logan, I think the first question that we have to start with is how in God's name do the Miami Heat approach the matchup with Nikola Jokic, who we both believe is the best player alive in the midst of a historic run? How do they hope to do battle with him, and how do you think they fare in that matchup?
So the first thing I think you do is you find a shaman or a priest. You find a cosmic entity, a deity. You know, you find a very holy, spiritual, religious place. You get all these three things, you know, the man, the place, the object. And you just pray to this object that you can slow down Nikola Jokic enough to win the NBA Finals. I think it is an insurmountable task. I think it is an unsolvable puzzle, Carson. I don't think there's anything that the Miami Heat can do to slow down Nikola Jokic. I think that to me is the biggest key in this series. Not really Jokic, because I think Jokic is literally unstoppable. I think we've established this through the playoffs. I think the big question is what Spoelstra can do to slow him down effectively. And like I said, I don't know, outside of crossing your fingers and hoping or praying, if there's anything you can do. I think the Heat are going to explore using that zone a lot, Carson, and seeing if they can slow down Denver. I mean, it was really effective against New York. It was really effective against Boston. But again, Denver's not like those two teams. They have an established formula. They are dynamic. They can kill you in so many versatile different ways. They're not just a team that's going to go, oh, there's an open wing three, and I took one pass, or I took two dribbles, and I'm going to chuck this thing up. They're not like that. I don't think the zone's going to be super effective against them. So if we're looking at the primary matchup against Nikola Jokic, and this is no disrespect to Bam Adebayo, because I think Heat diehards, I think fans that really want to see this upset happen are going to point to Bam Adebayo and say, oh, well, Bam is a top 5 defensive player on the planet. He's one of the best in the league, and that's true. It's very true. But to me, the thing is, yes, we've seen the Miami Heat take down two teams that were top 5 offenses in the regular season. We saw them slow down Boston. We saw them slow down New York. This is a different task altogether. It's like we already saw Nikola Jokic go through the best defensive player on planet Earth in Anthony Davis. Why are we expecting Bam Adebayo to, one-for-one, apples to apples, be able to slow down Nikola Jokic? I just don't think it's reasonable. This is no slight at Bam. I think he's a great defender. I just don't think you can guard Nikola Jokic one-on-one. That's the issue, man. You throw a double at him, he's going to take it apart. You throw one guy at him, he's just going to go through him and score. I just think this is an unsolvable puzzle, Carson. I don't think, if we're looking at a key to take Nikola Jokic away, I just think you're looking at the wrong keys, man. I don't think that's something that you can effectively do in this series.
I agree, and I do not think that the zone is going to be tenable at all in this matchup. I think that it was a game breaker against Boston. We touched on it. Game 7, 19 points in 34 possessions against that zone. It almost swung Game 6 in Miami's favor. It did swing Game 2. Very effective against New York as well. But Nikola Jokic is the ultimate zone breaker in the NBA right now, and the Nuggets are arguably the best team against zone in the NBA. They were a 93rd percentile offense versus zone in the regular season, 1.16 points per possession, which is just ridiculous half-court production. And I went through and looked at every possession that the Nuggets have faced zone in these playoffs and every possession that they face specifically Miami's zone in the regular season. And I think they are just going to destroy it if Miami tries it, because we saw Boston have trouble, right? Consistently penetrating the zone, getting into that middle of the floor area where you can really dissect. Nikola Jokic lives there. Like, he will just live at the free throw line at the top of the key. And if you send a second body his way just a bit, he is going to make the perfect read. It was laughable against Miami in the regular season. Like, the second he touches the ball at the free throw line, it's out to a shooter, wide open look from deep. And then if you have Bam parked in the paint, well, then fine, Jokic can just attack him with floaters if he's getting those touches at the free throw line area. He's going to demand a lot of help on the inside against the zone, a lot of kick out opportunities. And the Nuggets just collectively are so good at moving to open space and are such a great shooting team that with Jokic being capable of making every pass in the book, being such a massive hub to attack that zone from the middle of the floor, they just end up destroying these zone looks. And I don't think there's an amount of pressure that you can apply to Jokic that will make him uncomfortable. He is always composed. We've talked about it. This Denver team has the lowest turnover rate in the playoffs. They are also the number 2 3-point shooting team in the playoffs. So they're not going to be as susceptible to these stretches where they're just clanging threes. They're going to be getting better looks, and Jokic is just a completely different level as a playmaker and is the best half-court scorer who they've faced, the most imposing physical presence in the paint, certainly since Giannis, but he has a different level of half-court composure, playmaking, and all-around shot making. So I think they're in a lot of trouble if they try that. And then Bam absolutely cannot cover Jokic one-on-one because nobody can, as we've talked about. Jokic on post-ups in these playoffs is producing 1.2 points per possession. That number holds true whether he is the one shooting the ball or if he is the one passing. No matter what, you are getting incredible shot quality. And he's just a complete mismatch for Bam. Bam is a top 5 defender alive. He is an unbelievable team defender, highly switchable, very high IQ, very good rim protector. He is not the answer for Nikola Jokic, though. And a big reason for that is just sheer size. He's 6'9" with a 7'1" wingspan. So nobody is capable of guarding Jokic one-on-one. We saw that with AD. We saw that with DeAndre Ayton. We saw that with Rudy Gobert. But all of those guys were taller. They were longer. AD was at least able to affect some of Jokic's skilled shot making a bit with his shot blocking. And he still cooked them all anyways. Bam, I just don't think is equipped to battle there. And then you have all the things that no one can take away, right? The pick and pop game. Jokic's 53% effective field goal percentage on jumpers in these playoffs. Devastating looks that you really can't take away. The floater game where he was near 70% this regular season. Can't really take that away out of pick and roll. His ability to push in transition where the Nuggets have been brilliant in this postseason. There's so many things that just don't go away with him and the Nuggets. And they also very clearly don't have the personnel to try the strategy that has been probably most effective against Jokic. Again, nobody has approached taking him away. But there's a reason that we saw the Timberwolves shift to the strategy of Cat on Jokic with Gobert, their best defender, their best rim protector in help. And then we saw the Lakers do the same thing with Rui Hachimura and LeBron James with Anthony Davis in help. Because if nobody can take him away one-on-one, you might as well have a guy who is able to affect him with help. And then if you can be disciplined, if you can use your length to take away some of those passing lanes, now you're making things tougher on Jokic. Miami doesn't have anybody who can possibly take on that role. Like Kevin Love would be the option if you're just talking about a big body other than Bam, and there's no way, dude. I mean, Kevin Love's 6'8", right? He's stout, but he's not a good defensive player. He's just getting cooked over and over again, so they have to put Bam on him. They can't have him in what might be theoretically his most effective role as the roamer. So I just think they're getting cooked there, man. And then you look at the other side of the ball. Can Bam attack Nikola Jokic? And I'm not convinced that this is a very good matchup for Bam, because I think that Jokic's size and strength and physicality spell trouble for Bam, right? He is not super inclined to bully people, and he's not going to be able to do that against Jokic. I think also Jokic's hands spell some real trouble for Bam with the difficulty we've seen with him when he's facing doubles on the interior, off the catch against active hands. He's made a lot of mistakes there. Jokic has great hands. And so he's going to get his looks out of drop, just like AD did. You're going to concede those touch shots. And yeah, Bam is above average for a big at that, but you'll live with it. His numbers throughout these playoffs, 41% in the paint outside the restricted area, 36% for mid-range. Those are the kind of looks that he's going to be getting out of pick and roll. And those are mostly the kind of looks he's going to be getting out of post-up, face-up, isolation situations. He's just prone to settling for the most part. Now, if we get aggressive Bam, who is trying to attack Jokic with his quickness, I think that's a way that he can up his ceiling in this series. But overall in these playoffs, he just hasn't been a consistently effective enough scorer, right? He's 22nd percentile isolation, 52nd percentile out of the post, 36th percentile out of the pick and roll in terms of efficiency. And so Bam can hope to make Jokic work on the glass. I still think that Jokic wins that matchup. I think Bam has to be aggressive on offense. Again, trying to weaponize his quickness. That's where he holds an advantage potentially. And make Jokic work again. See if you can get him in foul trouble. That could have changed the dynamic in a couple of games in that Lakers series, but the Nuggets were able to hold on. And then defensively, you try to affect a shot or two a game. I just really don't think he's taking Jokic out of his comfort zone. So I think Jokic absolutely dominates that matchup as he would against anybody in the NBA right now, as he is against everybody in the NBA right now.
Yeah, and keying in on that matchup specifically, Carson, I think that, you hit on them not having switchable personnel. I mean, that's just on the floor at all times, too. That's something else that I think spells trouble for Miami. LA had to switch that with all the movement that Denver had, right? I mean, if you need to switch Bam out, I mean, you don't even have guys who are capable at putting a body on Jokic. Like a Martin switch, a Strus switch, a Vincent switch, any switch in the book. I mean, it is a mismatch for Miami. I do think there's one area on offense, and you tell me what you think, Carson. I think there's one area that you can attack Jokic, and I think that Bam has to be physical in this series for a few reasons. One, I think he can actually tangibly win that quickness battle against Jokic, and then two, with the lack of creators that Miami has, I mean, it's inevitable, right? For Miami to pull an upset, it's just a numbers thing. Like, you just need guys to step up in points per game production. You just need guys to score more. So fundamentally, they're going to need Bam a little more in this series. I think the way to weaponize it, and we'll see how Denver comes out defensively too, because they've got a lot of looks too, not just straight man up. I would try to weaponize Bam in the best role that he has, and that's not a lot of possessions initiating, but a little more DHOs, a lot of stuff off ball, off screens, either trying to get Jokic in drop where you're getting good pull-up looks from three or out of the mid-range from your guys, because that's where Miami eats. A lot of these guys, great pull-up shooters off of screens at the top of the key, and taking advantage of that little space created by a Bam screen to get into the lane. And if you get Jokic into some bad tendencies where he's dropping a lot, I think that's where you can tangibly burn him. That's kind of the only thing that I think they can exploit from this defense and from Jokic, though. But, we saw it work against Milwaukee, and it led them to a series win. Obviously, there were a lot of other factors combined into that Milwaukee series, but that was a huge component of it. So what do you think about that? Is that the biggest area that Miami should attack defensively?
Unequivocally, it's been their best formula to easy offense all playoffs. You can have superhuman Jimmy, but when you're running these handoffs, when you're running pick and roll against drop coverages, you're getting good looks for Kyle Lowry's and Gabe Vincent's and Duncan Robinson's, guys who don't necessarily have athletic advantages against really anybody that they can exploit, but can shoot the hell out of the ball. So I'm with you there completely, and Bam is a very good playmaker out of structure. I don't think he's as good at reading help. Again, he can get flustered in the paint, but if you're just talking about, all right, here we go, spot this cutter from the high post, make the right read out of a DHO, stand in there, set a hell of a screen, create a good look for your teammate. Bam does excel there. But Jokic is the best player in the world. I mean, this playoff run, it's 30, 13, and 10 on 62% true shooting. He's led the Nuggets to have a better offensive rating than any champion in NBA history, and I just don't see that changing, that level of dominance in this series. And as we've talked about, his floor in the NBA is the highest because of his ability to get to his spots, because of his dominance on the glass, because of his touch shot making and how consistently great that is from in the paint, because of his genius playmaking, the fact that he is going to demand attention on a post touch no matter what. Like, there's just a versatility with him and a consistency of that high-end impact that nobody in the league is matching right now. But Jimmy Butler has been a superstar in his own right, Logan, and I do think he is a challenge that the Nuggets are going to have to deal with on the opposite end. So how do you look at that matchup? How do you think Jimmy fares in this series?
Who do you think's going to guard him? Are they going to put Aaron Gordon on him, or are they going to put Michael Porter Jr. on him?
I would definitely put Aaron Gordon on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think Aaron Gordon's the much more well-equipped defender at taking on Jimmy. It's tough, man. It feels like it's up to Jimmy and how effective he's going to be. And what I mean by that is it's just like, not even touches, it's Jimmy dictates everything. It's felt like Jimmy's dictated everything. Jimmy didn't look great in the Boston series, and that's something that I want to hit on too, is it's like, guys, for Miami to pull off this upset, like I know we've talked about all throughout these playoffs about how big of an underdog Miami has been in all of these series. Like, and I know we've said it for both of these series, guys, you're not going to need Jimmy on another level, and I mean Milwaukee level. The Jimmy that we got in this series against Boston is not going to cut it. You need a consistent, super efficient, great playmaker, getting buckets at will. This entire series, I mean every possession. Like, it's going to take the best effort that we've seen through these playoffs. What we got against Boston and what we got against New York is not going to cut it in this series. You're going to need Jimmy to take a step up from even what we know Jimmy can take. I think Aaron Gordon's a good matchup, Carson. I think AG can keep Jimmy in front of him, can match that physicality. I think Jimmy's going to eat, right? Jimmy eats on anybody. And Miami's clever enough to where, me and you can predict this. We're going to say most of these possessions, we're going to get Jimmy on AG. Miami's also one of the most clever offenses at just creating those mismatches throughout the flow of the offense. That's pin downs from anybody where you're switching another guard. So, that's, again, one of the things that makes this Miami offense so great is that they're great at picking up on mismatches. So, I'm going to say that they're going to put AG on Jimmy. The thing to me is that they're going to be able to get those switches at will. If they want Jamal, if they want KCP, any of these guys are going to set a screen and they're going to put them on him. So I think Jimmy's going to eat, but it's, again, man, to win this series, guys, you're going to need Jimmy at, I think, over 30 points per game. I think at damn near 10 assists per game, at over 50% from the field, 35% from deep. I mean, and still, I think they could lose this series. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to take Jimmy being great. I don't think the other guys match up well for Jimmy, Carson. I think he eats on Jamal. I think he eats on Michael Porter Jr. I don't think MPJ can be as physical with him, although he has that extra length. I think KCP and Brown are options, but I think Aaron Gordon is the best answer for Jimmy. Not that he's going to limit him in any crazy ways, but like I said, too, man, the deadly part of that is that I think Miami can get those switches at will. But we're going to need the best Jimmy in these playoffs that we've seen. We're going to need Milwaukee Jimmy on steroids for Miami to win this series.
I don't know if Milwaukee Jimmy on steroids exists. He had 56 and then 40.
I know, but it feels we're going to need like 80-point Jimmy, man.
Okay, we need 80-point Jimmy.
We need Elgin Baylor Kobe Jimmy, man.
I do think Jimmy's going to ball out in this series because I think you're absolutely right. Aaron Gordon is a tough one-on-one matchup, right? He is a big, long, athletic guy. Those are the kind of players that we have seen give Jimmy a bit more trouble. A Jason Tatum, for example. But he's so good at mismatch hunting. He lives for it. He lives for getting the smaller guard who he can work into the lane, who he can kill with his turnarounds or his mid-range pull-up shooting game or get all the way to the rim. He lives for hunting the bigs and attacking them either with quickness or with his pull-up jump shooting. So a lot of it is going to be about how can you exploit the weakest defensive piece on the floor at all times. So I think we're going to see a lot of pick and roll with Jamal Murray's man. You think about what we've seen last series with Jimmy trying to get Derek White, who is all defense. I mean, a really, really good defender, but the smallest guy on the floor, and therefore Jimmy wants him. Or you think about what we saw with LeBron running that pick and roll with Austin Reeves to try to involve Murray, right? But now make that Jimmy Butler and Max Strus. That can be a lethal combination. If you get a clean switch, then fine. Jimmy's going to attack him with his physicality, with his strength. Or if Jamal shows and that isn't quick enough to recover, now you got a lethal shooter with a good look on the wing. So I do think that that's going to be a formula for good offense. But still, Jamal, as the weak link, is a 6'4", athletic, reasonably strong guard. It's not awful. And I don't want to compare him to Derek White, who's a much better defender, but the physical profile is actually quite similar. And we saw Jimmy have varying degrees of success in that matchup with Derek White, who has awesome ball instincts, awesome intensity on that end of the floor. Again, I don't want to make it an apples-to-apples comparison, but Jimmy wasn't just always easily physically bullying him. So that is certainly something to watch. And then I do think that Jimmy will get some pretty solid looks from the mid-range against Jokic out of drop. And I think the Nuggets are going to have a decision on how do they approach this. We saw what they did in that series against Phoenix, where they had Jokic come higher out of his drop, and then they had whoever was on the weak side corner shooter rotate over, become the low man, tag the roller, and basically force the Suns to make those tough skip passes to the weak side corner and then force those shooters to make shots because they said, we don't want to live with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant getting clean looks, mid-range pull-ups out of pick and roll, which I think makes sense. I do think with this Miami team, Jimmy obviously is a good mid-range shooter, but he's been 42% from mid-range in these playoffs, right? It's not automatic, elite, highly efficient offense. So you don't want to just concede those looks, but I do think that letting these shooters get hot is probably more dangerous. We have seen Miami shoot the ball unbelievably well in this playoff run, 39% from deep. So yeah, you're forcing Jimmy to make tough passes if it's that skip straight to the corner, but maybe he swings it to the wing and now it's just one more pass to the corner and you've got the defense in rotation. Maybe you still get a clean look there. So I don't know that they will be quite as aggressive in trying to take away those mid-range pull-up looks, because I don't know that Jimmy demands the level of respect as a pull-up jump shooter that Book and KD did. And sometimes Jimmy might sort of shoot himself out of a game. So I think that the path to Miami winning this series, a lot of it is about more unbelievable shooting. So you want to take away those opportunities. I think Jimmy fares well. I think there are mismatches that he can attack. I don't know that it's enough, though, compared to how unstoppable I think this Denver offense is going to consistently be.
No, I think you're right. I think it really does come down to shooting, Carson. That's a huge aspect of this. Miami's been the #1 shooting team from behind the arc in these playoffs. And honestly, man, this is a really interesting part of these finals. Is it's the two best three-point shooting teams in these playoffs. Miami's at 39%, Denver's at 38.6%. Like, shooting's going to really swing this. And I also think a part of that, Carson, is the role players. Like, I know we've talked about them all, playoffs long. Not only do the role players have to play well, right? Vincent, Strus, Robinson, Lowry, and Love all combined for 48, nearly 50 points per game in these playoffs, right? Martin, Vincent, and D-Rob are all over 39% from behind the arc. Martin and Robinson are over 43%. Strus, Lowry, and Love are all over 35% from deep. Like, all of these guys have heaters on them. And when they get hot, they can all legitimately swing games. So I think all the role players have to shoot and play well. They have been key cogs in Miami getting to this into the finals. Somebody else is going to have to step up, though, right? Like, I still think that is a major key in winning these finals. Like, let's not forget, guys, like Caleb Martin, I think, deserved. If I had a vote, he would have been my Eastern Conference Finals MVP. I think you can argue, like, 1-to-1 if Jimmy or Caleb was the better player in this series. But, like, I always am a big, not always, but in a situation like this, I think narrative does come into play where you're like, man, if a guy elevates his game to this level, like, to me, it's like, man, let's give the guy, his flowers. It's like Cornbread Maxwell getting that finals MVP, right? It's like when a role player can elevate his level that much, it's like, come on, man, let's give him his flowers. So I think another big key in this is that Caleb Martin or one of these role players is going to have to step it up a notch too. Martin in the Eastern Conference Finals, 19 points on 60-49 splits. Point blank, Miami does not win that series if Caleb Martin does not take that leap. Like, you need somebody else to step up in a major way. And the good part about this, the beauty of this for Miami, is that hopefully by game 3 or 4, I'm hearing game 3, I'm hoping maybe it's earlier in the series, you get a guy like Tyler Hero who can come in and really make a difference. It's going to be tough, right? A guy who has not played all playoffs long, who is coming off of an injury, he's probably going to struggle to get back into the flow of games. That's just how it happens. When you're not playing consistently, it's going to be hard to get back up to that top level. But what we saw from Hero in the regular season, 20 points a night on 44, 38, 93 splits. This is a team that is starved for a lot of offensive creation. This is a team that is starved for reliable creators. So all of these are things that need to come together. You need the role players to play well. I think you need one of these role players to step up and play a big role. And I think you need Tyler Hero to also step in and be great immediately. Like, these are all boxes that needs to be ticked. And I don't know, man. There's so many keys to this for Miami. It feels like a laundry list of boxes that needs to be checked. I also think they need to win all the hustle plays. I think Denver has to hit a skid offensively somehow. I honestly think Miami needs to steal a game or two at home. All of these things need to come together, but I think one of the biggest keys in this series, I think you need really effective and efficient Tyler Hero, Carson. All of the role players have to play their jobs. And one of these role players, I'm picking on you, Caleb Martin, because you showed us what you can do in the Eastern Conference Finals, have to take a step up and be a reliable third or fourth option, because I don't think Bam's going to be that second offensively, right? I think you either need to be that 2 or 3, honestly, offensively to help Jimmy out, and then when Hero steps in, Hero has to be great. Jimmy has a big role in these playoffs. So do the role players. They have to be great, and I think Hero does when he hits the floor for Miami to have a shot in this series.
I completely agree with you. I think Miami is going to need lethal shooting to win this series and really good role player and specifically deep bench contributions. First key is the shooting. It's a huge reason that they're where they are. And if you look at the games that they've won against these significantly more talented teams, the Bucks and the Celtics, they shot 45% from deep in their wins against the Bucks. They shot 48% from deep in their wins against the Celtics. The Knicks, they were able to get away with the down shooting series because I think they were just better, honestly, in that series. They were able to make that Knicks offense really uncomfortable. They had clearly the best player in the series in Jimmy Butler. But Denver is the best team that they've faced so far. Now, I don't think that that is sustainable, honestly. And that's not to say that Miami isn't a very good shooting team. I just think near 50%, it's reasonable to say, is unsustainable. But the other key, I think, is an important one that you pointed out. Because when we look at these supporting casts, we tend to talk about talent in terms of who is at the top end of the roster, right? And you and I have done that a lot throughout these playoffs. You look at who's the third best guy, who's the fourth best guy. And for the most part, Miami is probably not going to win those conversations. On paper, at the very least. Caleb Martin, to be one of your top 3 guys last series, he was excellent, right? But that's sort of the exception throughout this playoff run. For the most part, it has been the aggregate impact of these supporting pieces in Miami. Because, yeah, we can talk about third and fourth guys, but Miami's ability for the 7th or the 8th guy to step up in swing games has been second to none in this playoff run. Like, Denver, I think, has a very good top 6, but after Bruce Brown, they're pretty meh. They don't have a Duncan Robinson who can come in and swing games with his shooting, with his playmaking, a guy who is only giving you 18 minutes a night. They don't have a Kevin Love, who was key in the first 2 series here with his rebounding and playmaking and shooting and being a big body to throw out there, or a Kyle Lowry who can step up with his shooting and playmaking. Like, not that those guys are consistently good. They're not. They've both had very ugly moments, but they can be in any game. Even a Haywood Highsmith who gets called off the bench, and you see the impact of his defense and his shooting. So that is going to be huge for them. They need to win that category decisively. I do think, though, that in the overall supporting cast battle, Denver's 3 through 5, 3 through 6 is just better. And I think that there's a lot of real mismatches there. Like, who guards Aaron Gordon here? I think he is too big and too athletic for anyone. And they don't have the Rui, LeBron, AD kind of front court combination where they can mess with that Jokic, Aaron Gordon 2-man game just with their length. And right, we've talked about their inability to play someone in the roamer role. So it's not Kevin Love. It's not Jimmy Butler. Like, no matter what, I think you're looking at a mismatch there. And Aaron Gordon is an elite rim finisher and is an elite complementary piece to Nikola Jokic. Who guards MPJ? I mean, he's going to have 4 inches on anybody, again, unless it's Kevin Love, but Kevin Love can't guard 2 guys, and Kevin Love isn't a good defensive player. He's just big for a Miami team that is incredibly small, and 4 inches height advantage means a lot of clean looks for MPJ. I mean, that's all he needs to kill you with 40+% efficiency from deep. I think even KCP is going to be an athleticism size mismatch for whoever's going to have to guard him, because I think it's Gabe Vincent. I think you have to put Caleb Martin on Jamal. You need to throw a really high-level defender at him, and so that's not ideal. And if you look at the front court, I think overall, Gordon, MPJ, Jokic, that's a real size rebounding advantage. Denver's been the best rebounding team in these playoffs. Miami is number 10. So again, these Denver guys aren't just talented. They excel in highly complementary roles. And then Jamal Murray is a problem. dude. Like, Caleb Martin has good size. He has good length. He has awesome motor, high IQ defender. But I still don't know how you take away the two-man game with Nikola Jokic, the consistent high-quality shots that creates. Murray's a 90th percentile pick-and-roll scorer in these playoffs. And so much of his shot making is just great offense beating whatever defense he's facing. The pull-up jump shooting from the mid-range and from beyond the arc, it's just elite. It is of the highest tier in the league right now. He's 28 points per game on 60% true shooting. And the variety of ways that they can create looks for him is also a problem. And that applies to this entire Denver team. You are not going to lull them into stretches of taking the same shots that they're just clanking over and over again, right? They're going to get good looks for Murray out of handoffs. Same goes for MPJ. They're going to create great looks for their catch and shooters, but those same guys are going to cut very well and get good looks around the rim. They're going to do it in transition consistently. And I think that we focus on Jokic, of course, but all of these guys are important in making this an unstoppable machine. And as much respect as the Miami supporting cast has earned from me, because they've been very, very good, I still don't think it's as good as Denver's.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would push back on that, Carson, and they'd go, oh, well, teams like Boston and teams like New York had those physical advantages too, right? How come Miami was able to overcome those teams if they still face the same struggles? Why are you counting them out against Denver when they've beaten those similar mismatches? Well, I think you laid out a bunch of great points. One, these are teams that could get down on themselves. Boston and New York are teams that could just get mentally dejected, where those physical advantages go away because they're not making the hustle and effort plays anymore. I'll point to something key with Denver. Game 4 against LA, right? You're down in that game. You could have very well mentally checked out. Denver didn't. This is not a team that gets down on themselves. They play harder. They attack the next possession. They attack the glass. They hustle. They don't have the similar bad tendencies that the Knicks and Celtics do, because I think people would point and they'd go, oh, they were able to stop those offenses. No. Yes, Miami was able to do that in Game 7 against Boston. I think we saw the peak of their perimeter activity, physicality, and just engagement. And we saw them really stifle Boston offensively. You just can't do that against Denver because they don't have the similar bad tendencies. They're more dynamic than those teams. This is a hellacious mismatch, in my opinion, for Miami. In any way you look at it, and I think the biggest thing that you pointed out, Carson, is the offensive creation. And that is where I really draw the line at why I think Miami doesn't stand a chance in this series. And right, it's the same old story. I'm counting out Miami. Guys, Miami has needed 50 points per game from all of these bench creators. And if you include Caleb Martin in that, that's 62 points per game from all the role players, save Bam and Jimmy. Guys, the Nuggets are getting 60 points a game from just Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. There's just a different level of easy, reliable offense that comes with those two guys. Jamal is doing this on, I believe, 50, 40, 90. And if he's not at 50, I think he's at 48. He is 48, 40, 92 splits throughout these playoffs, nearly 30 points per game. Jokic is doing the same. The Nuggets have an offensive rating of 120 per 100 possessions through the first 3 rounds of these playoffs. That is just miles and miles ahead of Boston and New York. That's the highest offensive rating we've seen through 3 playoff rounds since the 2017 Cavs. The Nuggets are just a historically great all-time offense. There's just levels to this, Carson. And I think this is an insurmountable offense that Miami is going up against, man. I think this is too tall of a task, and I just don't think that Miami can exploit Denver the way they've been able to exploit these other teams, man. I don't think that Denver... I just feel bad because I feel like the entire time we've been tearing down Miami's case, but that's really part of this, guys, is that other teams have outplayed themselves. I don't think Denver is a team that's going to be able to outplay themselves. They're damn near perfect, and we're going to see that on full display.
They are just the most consistently great offense and team in the NBA. First round, they put up an offensive rating of over 117. Second round, over 120. And then conference finals against the defense that was looking like the best in the field with the best defensive player in the field, an offensive rating of over 122. Logan, they're not dependent on outlier shooting, although their shooting is very consistently elite because that's the personnel that they have. They have the best offensive player alive who creates the best shots in basketball for himself and others with an awesome supporting cast. And you're also right to lay out the bad tendencies that go beyond just exploitability offensively, because nobody plays with more consistent effort other than Miami than Denver. They are just not going to fall into those stretches where they're neglecting the little things. They don't do that. It's why they were able to sweep the Lakers. They hang in every game. They compete every possession. And it's really hard to overcome a talent deficit against a team that has all of those things going in their favor. Like, try whatever you want, man. Throw whatever look you want at Jokic, right? He's going to deal with any level of ball pressure. I mean, there are some looks against that zone where he's got a perimeter guy on him, and he's just so composed. He's so good at handling in traffic, and he's so physical that he just gets downhill, and now it's great. He's either going to get a good look at a floater or around the rim, or he's going to create for a shooter. And I believe in the consistency of that formula because it is the most real thing that we have seen in this playoff run for anybody. And it's the reason that they've only dropped 3 games so far and been so impressive. The hero return is an interesting wild card to have in here. I do think that if he's back and he looks like himself, he raises Miami's ceiling, more ball handling, more shot creation, a guy to turn to out of pick and roll, and an off-ball sniper, just an awesome shooter of the basketball. But it doesn't change the outlook for me a ton, honestly, because I think you are now introducing a defensive liability where defense has consistently been a strength for Miami. And there's not a lot of guys you can easily look at and say, okay, attack him in a vacuum. He's a weakness that they're playing right now. And he doesn't always play seamlessly within the flow of the offense. He's a very good off-ball weapon because of his shooting, but part of what has made Miami so good is their fluidity. And honestly, the fact that they don't have lots of great shot creators, but they have lots of great shooters. So they're constantly moving the ball. They're constantly using screening actions, and anybody can be involved in that and get a good look off of that. And they're very unselfish. And Hero doesn't feed the most seamlessly into that. So it doesn't really change my outlook. To me, what this comes down to is you have an unstoppable offense with incredible variety, with an incredible level of composure, with incredible shot making, a brilliant shooting ceiling, and the best player in the world, the best passer in the world, probably the best scorer in the world, for whom Miami does not have an answer. The size advantage, as we talked about, and how I think Denver is going to win pretty convincingly on the glass in this series. The fact that the Heat shooting is more variable, has been less consistent round to round. Obviously, in the regular season did not look like this. That's not to say that it isn't legitimately very good, but I still view Denver as the better shooting team in this series because of the consistency with which they have been elite. And I just don't see how Miami exploits this Denver team compared to previous teams that they've faced. Denver doesn't make the mental errors on either side of the ball. They don't fall into shooting droughts like some of these other teams and just lack a way out. They're not going to have the sort of clutch offensive issues that Milwaukee did where they lack direction. They're just going to keep getting good shots, and their best player has the highest floor in the NBA. So as a team, and especially as an offense, I believe they have the highest floor in the NBA. So I'm going to go Nuggets in 5. What's your official prediction here?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And if the Nuggets play up to potential, I could legitimately, I don't want to just batter the Heat. I could see this being a sweep, right? I'm not going to do that because I trust Miami to at least get one. I think that they're going to get hot shooting one night. I think Jimmy will have a big night. I think that everything regresses to the means, right? I think Denver will have an off night, and I think Miami can steal one. I will say, for Miami to have a chance, they have got to get one of these first 2 games. I mean that. They've done that in, correct me if I'm wrong, Carson, they've done that in every series, right, where they've stolen a game on the road. It's crucial. It's crucial for morale, I think just momentum. I think you have to get it early. Obviously, the Nuggets have home court. I think they've got to get one on the road to start off. If they go down 2-0, I will completely write them off. I think this series is wraps. I think it's over. But I'm going to go Nuggets in 5, man. I think they are the best team in basketball. I think they have the best player in basketball. it's just going to take a lot, man. It's going to take so many things going right where I think that Denver can – it's just easier, man. It's just easier. It's going to take so many things going right for Miami, and I don't – one of the biggest things that we have hammered home this entire playoff run is it has also taken Eric Spoelstra being the smartest head coach in basketball, out-executing every team and scheming something up. This is a Denver Nuggets team that I just don't think you can scheme around. So Eric Spoelstra deserves so much credit for this run, for his scheming, for all of his decisions. I don't think this is a Denver team that you can out-scheme. And they've got a great head coach on the other side, too, that can answer any of those schemes that you throw out at him. So I'm going to go Denver in 5, and I think for Miami to have a chance, like I said, I think they got to steal one of these first 2, or it's wraps.
And there is nowhere in the NBA that is tougher to win than Denver. Haven't lost at the home in these playoffs, and I think they're now 39-4 at home when Jokic plays this year. I mean, it's just disgusting, dude. So listen, you and I have underestimated Miami every step of the way. Like, there is no denying that. And they continue to win convincingly in these categories that you touched on: coaching, effort, execution. And Jimmy, for the most part, has been the best player on the floor across these series. Their role guys stepping up and making hugely meaningful contributions. All of that is true. But I believe in Denver as the best team in the league. I believe that they have concrete advantages, and I just, as you said, don't think that they can be exploited in the same way that some of these other teams have been. But we will see. Last thing I want to do here is talk about what's on the line for some of these great players, because I think this is a really cool finals in that somebody is going to get their first ring, and somebody is therefore going to fundamentally change their legacy forever. And I think that if Nikola Jokic does that, he establishes himself firmly as a top 20 player of all time. And he's only 28 years old, but I think that his peak is among the highest we've ever seen in the sport. I think offensively, it's a top 5 peak of all time. Again, just completely unprecedented production and efficiency. His scoring and playmaking is the best on the planet right now. For example, I think Jokic is already better than Dirk, and I've been saying that actually for a couple years, but I think he is every bit as versatile and devastating as a shot maker. I think there is a different level of physical imposition with him. You can talk about young Dirk being more agile, quicker. Absolutely true. I think that Jokic's physical dominance at 285 pounds and ability to get to his spot at will against anybody in the NBA and then hit these touch shots with 65-70% efficiency outweighs that advantage. He's a way better rebounder. He's currently having a better scoring run probably than Dirk ever did while being the best playmaker alive. None of that is to discredit Dirk. Dirk is one of the 20 greatest players ever, who had a historic finals run, who had this awesome longevity. All of this is absolutely true, but Jokic is just a more complete, monumentally great offensive player. And if he does this, he's doing something that KG, that Jerry West, that Dr. J, Moses never did, and that is to win a title as the lone superstar on a team. And so when you're looking at one of the 5 greatest offensive peaks ever, I don't know how you keep that guy out of the top 20. He's just flat out better than a lot of the guys who are in those conversations right now. And I think he's going to go out there and prove it, because there are still people, Logan, who are doubting him to an extent that does not make sense. Like Dwight Howard the other day goes out and says that he was better than Jokic at his peak. Fine. Dwight Howard can say whatever he wants. I really don't care about what athletes say about themselves, because I think you fall into 2 categories. You are either overly humble, you're going to give credit to everybody else in comparison to you, or you're overly arrogant. J.R. Smith probably thinks he was the best player in the league, right? Like, it's just not a meaningful thing to me, and I think we're giving way too much attention to NBA players just kind of going on different podcasts and saying stuff about themselves all time, or whoever all time, to start conversations. But the amount of people who seem to agree with Dwight just continues to affirm to me that people haven't really accepted what we're seeing with Jokic yet. One of the greatest one-man offensive engines ever. That is in no way to disparage Dwight. Dwight was incredible. I would say that Dwight is probably underrated all time, given that he wasn't on the NBA top 75 list when he is way better than guys like Carmelo Anthony, who was there. I think he's had a better career than a Damian Lillard, who was there. Dwight was, I believe, 5 straight years first-team All-NBA, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, best player on a finalist, MVP runner-up, a dominant defensive and athletic force. All of that is true. Jokic's ability to singularly launch elite offenses, though, and to completely dominate as both a scorer and a playmaker in every phase of the game, it's just more valuable. What he's doing right now is beyond a shadow of a doubt more impressive than anything Dwight ever did in his career. That's in the postseason, and in the regular season, he could have been a 3-time consecutive MVP. Like, it's not a matter of disparaging others' greatness. It's a matter of acknowledging that Jokic is working his way towards the pantheon. So I think that that's what's on the line for him. What is your take on all that?
I think there is an ideological difference too, Carson, just to touch on the Jokic-Dwight stuff real quick. It's like, guys, like, you can give credit for Dwight for being the most dominant defensive force on planet Earth, right? You have to give him credit. He was great offensively too, but he was limited, right? He's a rim runner, a lob threat, a dunker. It's not like, yeah, man, Dwight was running inverted pick and roll from the top of the key and splashing threes at a 40% clip. Guys, do you hear yourselves? Like, if you genuinely think Dwight Howard's better, and like that's what I was saying about ideologically, right, is you can maybe fundamentally believe the defense is more valuable. I think in the NBA today, you need to have a great defense, but I think great unstoppable offense is more valuable inherently at this point, right?
It is. Look at who dictates championships. Great offensive players.
Dude, exactly. I mean, it goes hand in hand. You need both, but it's just more valuable in today's NBA, and you just, like, dude, it's not even close. Like, they're not even in the same. Jokic is on a different planet when you talk about offensive ability, man. There's not even, like, a conversation to be had about that. I think that's asinine. I think Dwight is underrated, but I don't really think that's a conversation. I think Jokic is, I mean, I don't want to, like, overstep my bounds here. I mean, Jokic is in conversation for one of the greatest centers of all time if he gets this ring. Obviously, to build upon it, to really be in that argument, you need to get a few more rings under your belt, right? There's a standard that you need to hit, but a genuine opportunity at 3 MVPs if you include this season. I think he was robbed this season. I think we should have saw 3 straight, but he's already got 2 MVPs under his belt. He will finally get the ring that will validate him to everybody who watches or who doesn't watch basketball, right? Because we've already validated Jokic. We know how great he is. A ring really doesn't make a difference at this point. It validates him. It gives him that credence that he needs, that credibility. But I think he will concretely be top 20. And I just think you have to look at his skill set, guys. That's one of the biggest things that when we go into comparison, I feel like people always want to compare raw accolades, MVPs, All-NBA teams, All-Star teams, total points. Numbers are great. That's why we do a show called Nerd Sesh. We both like really weird numbers that affirm what we think about basketball. But I think so much more importantly is the skill set. Like, Carson, what you're saying about Dirk, I think a lot of people will push back. Dirk was also an MVP. Dirk was a guy who was the best player on a finals team that got the job done. But again, the skill set, man. Dirk and so many other bigs of all time just could not do what Jokic is doing. So I think that certainly is on the line. And then I think if you look at this from the other side, I think it is very improbable that Jimmy Butler gets his championship ring. But considering all that has happened throughout these playoffs, you know what, man? I'm not going to count it out because these playoffs have been so damn weird. We've got the second 8 seed ever going to the NBA Finals. You know what, man? If Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat get it done, Carson, I'm not going to be surprised because I've seen some really wacky, zany things throughout these playoffs. So on the other line of this, if Jimmy somehow can get the job done, I think it's really improbable. You're validating Jimmy to the point where he's maybe, I mean, dude, I don't want to go crazy. I mean, what, top 30, top 25 all time? I mean, I really think Jimmy could have an opportunity at that.
I'm not going to go all the way
Where do you
there.
have Kawhi all time?
I would have Kawhi. I have to map this all out. Certainly somewhere in the 20s. Like,
is
probably
Jimmy,
mid-20s.
Kawhi has 2 finals MVPs. He was the
Kawhi's in a different league.
You think he's in
Butler.
even if Jimmy gets this thing done, you think he's in a completely different tier?
I do. I think that Kawhi made a legitimate case for best player alive. I think the 2019 run was better than anything that Jimmy has done, with all due respect to Jimmy. I think Kawhi at his peak is one of the 3 best perimeter defenders that we've ever seen, maybe the best pure perimeter defender, and I think that he was a different level as a scorer, especially in terms of consistency with just brutal efficiency, devastating shot making from everywhere on the floor. I think Kawhi was a marvel at his peak. And by the way, still is a marvel every year when he gets to the playoffs when he's actually healthy.
That's fair. I think Jimmy would probably then, somewhere between 30 and 20, though, man. I mean that. Like, Jimmy's...
No, that's too high. You got to look at the names, bro. You got to look at the names who in there. You're talking about John Havlicek's and Dwayne Wade's. Like,
I was going to say D. Wade. I mean, you don't even think that's a conversation.
Oh, my God. No. D. Wade is better than Kawhi. 2006 to 2009,
he was a
D.
beast
Wade.
during that run, dude.
I mean, one of the greatest downhill forces that we've ever seen, an elite defensive guard, great playmaker, and the 2006 finals run is one of the most impressive ever. Different classes.
So is Jimmy just, with a ring, do you think, is he top 50 with or without a ring right now?
I think he is knocking on the door, and this is what I laid out last episode. Since the NBA-ABA merger, 1976, he is now one of 20 players to be the clear best guy on 2 NBA finalists and one of 25 to be the clear best guy on 3 conference finalists. So that's a great class to be in, but I think that there's still guys who have like a completely different level of regular season consistency and overall playoff consistency, because a lot of this with Jimmy is based on the last 4 years where he's been incredible. Since 2020, 25, 7, 5.5 on 59% true shooting in the playoffs. Went through the list last year, only 9 guys to go 27, 7, 5 on 58% true shooting in multiple playoff runs. I didn't think that I would have to be talking anybody down from the Jimmy Butler tree. I feel like I've been the one pushing that he's entering those top 50 conversations, but we're going to start looking at him as, well, if he wins a ring as the best guy, he would probably pass a Clyde Drexler, for example. I still don't know that he's into that top 40, but I think either way he belongs somewhere between 40 and 60, regardless of the outcome here. But, I mean, there's only so many guys who have been the best player on a title team, Logan, throughout NBA history. It is a special thing. Elgin never did it. Karl Malone never did it. AI never did it. Patrick Ewing never did it. Steve Nash never did it. Charles Barkley never did it. Chris Paul never did it. And the consistency with which he has elevated his game in the playoff stage, how perfectly his game has translated for 3 out of these last 4 years, it's all very real stuff that needs to be acknowledged all time and puts him in those conversations. But I don't know that we should get carried away.
I just think, I don't know, imagining him beating Jokic, and I just think it's such an uphill battle for him to win this series that I think it would.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, with this supporting cast, it would just be really impressive again. I don't know. I want to propel him higher, but you're right. I just feel like in like a greatness tier, not even like actually like the moment. This entire run is just such an unrivaled, like unparalleled thing that we've seen in basketball. It really is remarkable. Would you have him above John Stockton, though, Carson? I mean, I think that's a real conversation we need to have, man.
If he was the best player on a title team, I would have him above John Stockton.
I mean, that's a complete joke, guys, for those wondering.
No. Stockton was great. I just think he gets overrated because I think longevity is overrated.
I think you're right, man. I don't want to overhype Jimmy too much. But again, I don't want to undersell how big of an accomplishment this is, dude. Again, it just feels like super untalented teams where your number 2 offensive guy wasn't here this entire run. This has been a truly historic run for Jimmy Butler again. And it's really impressive. If Jimmy does this, Carson, if he somehow, like, what would propel him, man? Does it take another 2 finals runs? Does it take him getting a ring? Is there anything that he could do to crack that top tier?
Like the top 30 of all time? I think it's an uphill battle, but if he goes back to the finals again next year, then I think, and he plays at this level, you could start to talk about it, but it's just a little late to join the party if you're talking about climbing to that level. Because, again, once you're knocking on top 50, well, just being the best guy on 2 finals teams is enough to get you close to that. But the top 30, most of those guys were really consistently great and had peaks that were also just higher than Jimmy and had that level of team success. So it'd be an uphill battle for sure. But this is an opportunity for a special legacy-defining moment. And already, I think the guy has proven himself on the playoff stage to be one of the great playoff risers and one of the defining players of this generation. Like, he has done the most meaningful thing. I guess winning a title is the most meaningful thing, but getting to the finals twice, again, with rosters that haven't been loaded in terms of talent, while he has been phenomenal individually, it's special stuff, and it's been a joy to watch. Shout out Playoff Jimmy. He's the man. Well, that's going to do it for us here today, guys. I am very, very excited for the NBA Finals to begin. This has been such a great postseason, and it's been a joy talking about it with you guys. So we will, of course, react to Game 1 on Thursday night. We're also going to be doing some preview content, talking with Jason Timpf, doing a Hoops Tonight collab tomorrow, so you guys should tune in for that. And if you enjoyed the show, then you can find us on YouTube, the Volume page. You can also listen to the podcast wherever audio. You can follow us on social media, TikTok at NerdSesh. That's where we're most consistent with our trivia content. You can also follow us on Instagram at the same handle and Twitter at nerd_sesh. And you can join our Discord where you can really just talk with us about basketball, football at any time. So with that, as always, I cannot wait for this basketball to start. Appreciate you guys. I have been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was NerdSesh.